Before there was Spenguli, before there was Elvira, before there was even Zachary, there was Vampira.
Screaming relaxes me so.
Vampira, aka Mila Nurmi, was a free-spirited and creative young woman who had worked as a dancer, a model, and as an actress. And in the early 1950s, she wanted to become an evangelicist and raise money for animal welfare. But she needed about $20,000 to get started, and television was brand new to the scene. There was this popular family show called The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet Nelson, which Mila thought was boring and obnoxious, and in some interviews, she'll even misremember their name and call them the Websters. She wanted to do a parody of them, but then realized that Charles Addams was already doing a satire on the average American family in his popular series of New Yorker cartoons. The characters didn't have names yet, but Mila wanted to bring this Charles Addams family to television. Unfortunately, she had no connections. Her friends suggested that the place to get noticed was the Belle Caribe costume ball. So Mila got dressed up as the Charles Addams lady, and out of about 2,000 people, she won Best Costume. Also in attendance was Hunt Stromberg Jr., who was the program director at the local Los Angeles TV station KABC. And they had just acquired the rights to a bunch of old, low-budget horror and mystery movies that they wanted to show at night. And he thought that Mila would be the perfect hostess. He didn't know her name or what she really looked like, so it took him about 5 months to find her. And he explained to her that this was a low-budget show. They couldn't afford to do the whole Addams family, they only wanted her, and they weren't going to give Charles Addams credit anyway. And Mila explained to him that she was not a thief. So Stromberg suggested that she make her character a vampire instead of a zombie. Mila asked for 2 weeks. Stromberg said, "I'll give you 4 days." Mila took inspiration not only from Charles Addams, but also from the mysterious, strong, and beautiful Dragon Lady from the Terry and the Pirates comic strip which she had read as a child, and from the imperious, cool, and in-control evil queen from Snow White. Her wardrobe ideas came from the bondage magazine Bazaar. She also got inspiration from the actresses Greta Garbo, Theda Bara, and from Gloria Swanson's portrayal of Norma Desmond in Sunset Boulevard. She created the long fingernails by boiling plastic food containers to make them soft and reshaping them. And she created the unbelievable 19-inch waist by wearing a waist cincher, fasting for 2 days before her show, getting dehydrated in the steam room, sleeping with a rubber contraption around her waist, and putting a mixture of cold cream and papaya powder on her waist to break down the cells like you would when you tenderize meat. This was to imply that she had no womb, making her the antithesis of what society wanted women to be. By the way, after her show was over, she'd usually go across the street and get a chili dog. Mila came up with the dark, sexy, and campy personality, and her husband Dean came up with the name Vampira. Originally, her show was called Nightmare Attic, and it aired live on Saturday night at midnight. But it was so immediately popular that they changed the time to 11 o'clock, and they changed the title to The Vampira Show. KBC was a local network, so only people in the Los Angeles area were able to watch her. But she had fan clubs all over the United States, Europe, and Asia. Vampira was a phenomenon. Unfortunately, as is the case with several live shows from this era, none of her episodes are known to still exist, so there is very little surviving film of her, but there is some. And I've created this list based on what is available for you to watch and how well does it give you the Vampira experience. So here are the top 5 Vampira appearances.
The night owls will fly. The devils will brew. Halloween is the night for Vampira in you. The movies are horror. At the stroke of 11, Vampira's just dying to meet you on 7.
Number 5. Vampira's guest appearance on The George Gobel Show. This footage was lost for over 50 years, and it is a comedy sketch featuring George Gobel and Mila Nurmi playing Vampira, playing the average American neighbor, Mrs. Jones.
The reason this is number 5 is she's not really playing Vampira here, but she described her show as like a one-woman Saturday Night Live, where she would do little skits. She didn't have time for a big costume change, but she would quickly dye her hair back. Or put on Groucho Marx glasses, say the secret word, win 100 bottles of arsenic. And would play different characters.
Once she was playing a scary librarian, and her best friend James Dean was hanging out on the set, so they had him play the pupil.
Macabre. Mangle. Manslaughter. Massacre. Merriment. Quiet!
All of these skits are lost, but her appearance on The George Gobel Show gives you an example of what they might have been like.
Won't you come in, Mr. Gobel? Don't step on the cat's tail.
I don't see a cat.
We don't have a cat, just his tail. Mind if I smoke?
No, not at all. It shows you what a great comedic actress she was and how popular she was because she's spoofing her image on national television. The joke is, Mrs. Jones thinks she's the average American neighbor, and George Gobel does funny reactions, which was there a little bit in the Charles Addams cartoons, but became one of the main sources of humor on both the Addams Family and the Munsters TV shows. And both shows did variations of the smoking gag. It's hard to tell how big her influence was without seeing her actual episodes, but years later she told her friend Marlon Brando that she felt that the TV show Morticia Addams was more based on Vampira than it was on the Charles Addams character.
I went to a delightful funeral yesterday. We buried a friend of mine. Alive!
Number 4. Her guest appearance on The Red Skelton Show. Just like The George Gobel Show, this sketch was lost for years and just recently found. Now, the writing isn't as good as Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, but it's still funny. There's a groovy skeleton dance number, and if you love classic horror, this cast is the Bat's Pajamas.
Of course, there's the classic comedian Red Skelton. Then there's Vampira. Bela-Lugosi as Count Dracula. And, as if things weren't hairy enough, Lon Chaney Jr. is a werewolf. So 3 horror icons in their signature roles on screen together. And even though Vampira is a horror movie hostess and not a classic movie monster, she has a gothic and spooky aura, where she fits in with Bela-Lugosi and Lon Chaney Jr. and feels just as iconic. Now, her and Bela are eternally linked, because they played husband and wife in Plan 9 from Outer Space. And more so than any of Bela's leading ladies, they are the perfect match.
They are both original and influential gothic vampires. The reason Vampira had the red lipstick on so thick was to imply that she had just ate. Even in the publicity photo of him biting her, they seem like equals. They both have this amazing inner strength and a god or goddess-like sense of evil. Bela was even the model for the demon in Fantasia, and Vampira was the model for Maleficent in Sleeping Beauty. And they also both carried their roles to their death. The director, Ed Wood, had just enough money to film some silent footage of his best friend Bela-Lugosi. Then Bela died, and Ed wrote the Plan 9 from Outer Space script around that footage. So this sketch is the only time they ever really acted together.
Good heavens, where am I at? In Pasadena?
Don't worry. You're in a graveyard. Ah, I see my sister Vampira. We are wasting our precious time. I must prepare the laboratory. You watch him. What a wonderful night for an operation. The moon's full.
Would you like to go out with me? After you're dead.
Would I like to go out with you? Folks, now's your chance to send the kids out of the room.
He's just what I've always wanted. Early American idiot. And now I shall transplant his brain into the robot's body and conquer the world.
Please, you're making enough noise to wake the living.
Now, in real life, Vampira adored Bela-Lugosi. At the end of the show, Bela took her by the arm and walked her to the footlights to take a bow. And Vampira said she felt like royalty, like all the queens of history rolled into one, and that Bela touched her with a magic that she had never known before or since. They are the king and queen of the vampires.
Now, I think it's only noticeable once or twice, which is normal for live television of this era. But Bela-Lugosi, who was 71, missed a few cues, and one of the show's writers, Johnny Carson, laughed at him. And Vampira always disliked Johnny Carson after that.
All work and no slay makes Vampira a dull girl. And remember, I sign epitaphs, not autographs.
Number 3, her 3-page spread in Life magazine.
Mila's inspirations, Morticia Adams, the Dragon Lady, and the Evil Queen, were drawings. She had been a cheesecake model. And she had been the photography assistant to the famous Bruno Bernard, who was taking photos of such perfect pinup models as Julie Newmar, the original Catwoman, and Norma Jean, who later changed her name to Marilyn Monroe. So Mila learned how to convey her character through a pose. This Life magazine spread came just 3 weeks after the premiere of the Vampira show, and the photos were taken by the 26-year-old Dennis Stock. And this is what first got Vampira national attention.
These photos document her famous opening, and just seeing her in that costume and makeup and doing that pose amongst the fog, you can imagine her scream. It's haunting and reminiscent of the famous expressionistic painting The Scream by Edward Munch. They went out in a 1932 Packard convertible, and she has a black umbrella to keep the horrible sun away. This photo creates the idea that Vampira is a real person going out in the real world, like a living Charles Addams cartoon. Mila used to get made up at home and then take the bus to work, so this idea is not far from the truth. Then there's the one where she's looking at a mother and her 2 daughters. The mother is smiling. Maybe she thinks it's great that someone could be so against society's expectations. But you could tell by their body language that the 2 little girls seem scared, and Vampira looks confused by them, as if they're both saying about each other, "Why is she dressed like that?"
Here's to zombies, the living dead. May you find one beneath your bed. They live on blood, and you should too. Hemoglobin is the drink for you. Trickle, trickle, trickle.
Number 2, the movie Plan 9 from Outer Space. This is the ultimate low-budget cult classic, and for years was the only known surviving footage of Vampira. In Plan 9, aliens resurrect 3 dead Earthlings, Bela-Lugosi, Vampira, and the Swedish wrestler Tora Johnson. It was written, directed, and produced by Ed Wood. And in 1980, the Medved brothers named it the worst movie of all time. And it developed this huge following. And as a new generation discovered Plan 9 from Outer Space and Ed Wood, they also discovered Vampira.
Ed Wood had been wanting to work with Vampira, but Vampira didn't want to work with Ed Wood. But after about a year of the Vampira show, KBC fired her for refusing to sell the rights to her character. She tried to revive her show on KJ, but they forced her to tone down her risque humor and she was canceled again. Now, no one would hire her, and she was living off $13 a week unemployment. And Ed Wood's friend Paul Marco came to the door with $201 bills, and Vampira couldn't say no. Then she read what her dialogue was supposed to be, and asked if she could play the part mute. And Paul Marco said, "Okay, whatever you say, we're using your name."
The dialogue is weird. They use toy model kits for the flying saucers, and the sets are cheap. But it is good, campy fun. It has tons of personality, there's no other movie like it, and Vampira is unforgettable in it. Bill Thompson, who had been a cameraman for decades, went up to Vampira and told her that she was very beautiful and it was an honor to light her. And when she is on screen, she elevates that cheap cemetery set into something spooky. She plays it as if in a silent trance, and those evil queen regal qualities shine through. And to me, it makes her scarier and more otherworldly. There's this eerie shot where she raises her hands, and the 2 grave robbers die off screen. You just feel her power. And there's another iconic shot where she's walking towards the camera and looks absolutely bloodthirsty. Now you can tell that Bela-Lugosi died before production. His stand-in, Ed's chiropractor, is famous for not looking like Bela. But on the same token, it gives the Bela-Lugosi footage a more ghostly effect, as if he's haunting Plan 9.
As they say in the Ed Wood movie, Bela rises from his grave, just like Dracula, and Vampira thought it was wonderful she was playing opposite a dead man. Even the way she stares at his crypt, you still feel that bond between them. Technically they're zombies, but they're both dressed in their classic vampire attire, and through Ed Wood's editing, are scaring people together.
Along with Bela, Vampira is also paired with Tor Johnson, who was actually alive, and they come off as this unique pair of spooky misfits. Vampira looks voluptuous, but has this inner strength, whereas Tor Johnson looks like King Kong, but you feel his inner sweetness and gentleness. The amazing Criswell, who was a television psychic who was almost always wrong, provides the super serious narration for all the craziness that happens on screen. And Criswell and Vampira were actually great friends. Criswell came from a family of morticians, so he helped with all the arrangements when Vampira's mother died. And Vampira always thought that Criswell was a real psychic, who just thought of himself as a fraud, and that's why he would occasionally get it right.
Each member of this ensemble is wonderfully bizarre in their own way, and Vampira is their star.
A scar on a hand might be quite continental, but demons are a ghoul's best friend.
Number 1 is the Vampira Show KABC promo video. This was made to show advertisers what the Vampira Show was like, and is the only known surviving footage of her actual series.
First, a representative of KBC explains the show's incredible popularity, and then we see Vampira's iconic opening. It takes place in a dimly lit, fog-filled corridor. We hear the eerie music,
music for strings, percussion, and celestial by Bela Bartok. You may recognize this swinging tune from The Shining. And as if in a trance, Vampira walks towards the camera and lets out a blood-curdling scream.
The movies she showed were not that old yet, so the Vampira show could be scary, and her character reflects that. This opening is eerie. Then in a voice suggesting extreme pleasure, she says, "Screaming relaxes me so." So right away you know she is spooky, sexy, and funny. Vampira was paid $75 a week, and KABC would only pay $100 to rent a film. So they never showed Dracula or Frankenstein. It was low-budget horror films, like The Flying Serpent, White Zombie starring Vampira.Lugosi, and Return of the Ape Man. And if they ran out of horror films, they would show something close, like a mystery or detective film. All horror movie host shows are based on the format of the Vampira show. She would introduce the movie, do the commercial breaks, and do the closing. Peter Robinson, whom Vampira adored, wrote the scripts, but he let her contribute too. She would do horror puns. She would smoke from her signature cigarette holder, which she chose because it was a phallic symbol. She'd make scary cocktails from her poison bar, like the Mortician's Martini or a vampire cocktail. She had a pet spider named Rollo. She would sing little songs, do skits, and even interact with the movie, like if something good happened.
"Madeline, my darling, you're alive."
How unfortunate.
Or if something bad happens,
It is unfortunate that you are no longer able to speak. I should be interested to hear you describe your symptoms. You see, you are the first man to know he was becoming a zombie. None of the others did.
Isn't that marvelous?
sometimes she wouldn't get her script until 15 minutes before airtime, and in the middle of going over it with the director, they'd have to stop and start the show. She had a teleprompter, but the way she just becomes that character, her dialogue feels natural. And in this promo video, you get a little less than 2 minutes of her fantastic spooky jokes.
I've often been asked why I don't light my attic with electricity. Don't be ridiculous. Everybody knows electricity is for chairs. Now, let me darken the room, and we shall commence.
Svengoolie and Elvira have more of a good, clean, fun quality, whereas Vampira is darker and more adult, and I love that edge. She delivers her lines earnestly, as if they're not a joke. This is really what Vampira thinks. So the adults watching would have been laughing. But if some kids were staying up past their bedtime, they would probably be terrified. I wish there was more of the Vampira show, but we are so lucky that this little bit still exists.
In 1981, KHJ wanted to revive the Vampira show with a new actress. And Mila, who still owned the character, was going to be the associate writer, associate producer, play different characters, but most importantly to her, she was going to find and train the new Vampira. But without Mila's involvement, KHJ hired Cassandra Peterson, so Mila refused to sign the contract. KHJ went ahead, but on the first day of filming, changed the character name to Elvira, and the show title to Movie Macabre. Vampira felt that there were at least 80 similarities between her show and the Elvira show. The set and her closing line are clearly similar, and Vampira sued. But the judge felt that stealing someone's likeness meant actual representation of a person, and not just similarities. So Elvira's side, which did have more money, won. Live shows from the 1950s were recorded on kinescopes, where you place a camera directly in front of a TV monitor. As of now, all episodes of the Vampira show are lost, but Vampira felt that the kinescopes did exist, and were being bought and sold on the black market. According to her, she was about to buy them, but someone bought them from underneath her. She suspected Elvira. While she never got rich off her character, Vampira was remembered. The punk band The Misfits did a tribute song to her, and Lisa Marie played Vampira in the Ed Wood movie. There were years when Vampira couldn't afford a telephone, but the resurgence in popularity at the end of her life let her be more financially stable. She did personal appearances, she was able to sell her artwork, and she even hired someone to run a MySpace and Facebook page for her, called Vampira's Attic.
This is Vampira. Until next week. Wishing you bad dreams, darlings.